My name is Kristen Spargo, and I'm the Director of Communications and Advancement and a 1995 alumna. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Professor Austin Sarat, the William Nelson Cromwell Professor of Jurisprudence and Political Science, a pioneering figure in the development of legal study in the liberal arts. He's also an internationally renowned scholar of capital punishment. He began teaching at Amherst in 1974 and founded the college's Law and Jurisprudence and Social Thought department. He is the author and editor of more than 70 books and is currently writing a book titled Hollywood's Law: What Movies Do for Democracy. Professor Sarat has received numerous prizes and awards, and he has been a guest commentator or made appearances on several leading news programs. Last summer, I had the great pleasure of writing an article about the Mellon tutorials and Professor Sarat's collaborative research with his students. And I can tell you that as one of his former students, I was more intimidated and nervous writing that article than I was bylining an article for a former governor.
And by the way, I gave her a B on it.
They published it in the magazine, but it was a great pleasure to work with him, and it is my great honor to welcome Austin Sarat.
I'm accompanied by two of my colleagues, Heather Richard and Henry Weaver, two of my 5 student colleagues on the project that we're going to talk a little bit about with you today, a project on the history of botched executions in the United States. To put that in the title of any talk, I was kind of curious about who would be attracted to a talk on botched executions. So there'll be a little personality test after this to see the kinds of folks who would come. Really, we want to talk as much about our collaboration as we do about the particular subject of botched executions, because we think that the kind of collaboration that has been developed under this Mellon program, about which I'm going to say a little bit, is an important development in the history of your college. So I'm going to say a little bit about botched executions, a little bit about the Mellon project. Henry and Heather are going to talk a little bit about their participation in the project and what we all think it might mean for liberal arts at Amherst. We hope to leave enough time so that you can ask questions about botched executions, and more particularly and more importantly, we are eager to hear whatever questions or curiosities you have about Amherst. And if you'd like some really good gossip about the new president, Heather and Henry are willing to give you that kind of gossip. For myself, I don't, because tenure is my favorite word in the English language. I'd like to keep mine. So I want to start by telling you a story, or at least offering you the beginning of a story about someone named Willie Francis. Willie Francis, at the age of 15, committed a homicide, a murder, in the state of Louisiana. He murdered a druggist for whom he had been working. And he was subsequently tried, put on trial, and convicted of this murder and sentenced to death in the state of Louisiana. So the crime happened in 1945. Willie Francis was to be executed a year later, which by contemporary standards is quite remarkable that the execution would be a year later. In 1946, Willie was strapped into Louisiana's electric chair. And in those days, the electric chair was a portable electric chair. It was taken from place to place, rather than, as it is in the case of the United States today, where execution is done in a central place. And the nickname of the electric chair in Louisiana at the time was Gruesome Gertie, which tells you a little bit about the story that I'm about to tell you. So Willie is strapped into the chair and to be electrocuted. And the switch is thrown, and there is some argument or some debate about whether or not the electricity reached Willie. But whether the electricity reached Willie or not, let's assume it did, Willie did not die. So the effort was made to electrocute him. Willie did not die. And after some period of time, the decision was made by the local executioners to stop trying to electrocute him and take him out of the chair. So they take him out of the chair and they return him to his cell. And sometime later, a local lawyer got wind of what happened to Willie. And the state of Louisiana had a plan for Willie. And the plan was they were going to put him in the chair the second time. And they were going to finish what they had started. They were going to try to complete the death sentence. But before they could do that, this local lawyer filed a lawsuit. And the local lawyer claimed that to put Willie in the chair the second time would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. I'm going to pause just to allow you to contemplate for a minute which amendment to the Constitution contains the prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment. Excuse me, by the way, we have this entirely worked out. So I'm going to have a colloquy. So which amendment to the Constitution contains the prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment?
I think the 8th Amendment.
Did you get it right?
I didn't hear it. He said 8th Amendment.
That's right.
So could we have a little applause? By the way, I'll be back in a few minutes to talk to you about quartering truth. So the claim was that the 8th Amendment prohibited the, if you will, the second electrocution of Willie Francis. And the claim was that if Willie would be put in that chair, it would be cruel. So let's start with this for a minute. Monty, would it be cruel, in your view, to put Willie? Now, in order to make this question clear, we have to put aside our views about capital punishment, and we have to put aside our views about the electric chair. So some of you might think that the capital punishment itself is cruel, or that electrocution is cruel. And you'll remember that the electric chair was first used, actually kind of pioneered in the state of New York, as a humane alternative to what was then the primary mode of execution in the United States, which was hanging. Totally good, it's a reform congregation. Okay. And you remember that the electric chair was actually kind of marketed by two people who were involved in the development of electricity in the United States, Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse. And Edison, in fact, did not want the form of current that he invented to be used for the electric chair. So he campaigned so that the state of New York would choose Westinghouse's form of current. Did any of you major in physics here?
Is it alternating and direct current?
Anybody knows that. The question is, which is which?
Edison was alternating. The other was direct. He wanted to use direct current.
So let me just ask my expert, is that correct?
What? I don't know electricity. I know history.
First of all, if you're going to make it at Amherst, you must simply make up what you don't know. So in any case, whatever form of electricity it was that Edison was marketing, he didn't want that form used. And he did a variety of things to persuade the state of New York to use Westinghouse's current, including actually electrocuting an elephant. And for those of you that have a perverse sensibility, you can go on YouTube and actually see the very grainy film of the electrocution of this elephant. And when the state of New York decided to use Westinghouse's current, Edison wanted the process of electrocution called Westinghousing someone. Right? A truly brilliant form of kind of reverse marketing. So you need to put aside, by the way, Monty, I'm killing time for you. You need to put aside your views about capital punishment or your views about electrocution to answer my question. So my question is, holding aside your views of capital punishment or electrocution, would it be cruel to put Willie in the chair the second time to finish the job?
Yeah, and I would say it would be cruel because it is delayed. It's unduly delayed. It takes too long and puts him through undue suffering.
Well, I'm waiting for a check from Amherst College, which I expected last month, and it doesn't come. Would you say that's cruel? By the way, I'm waiting for my son Ben to stop using the word like in all of his sentences, and I've been waiting a long time.
There's a difference in magnitude between
Good.
death and compensation.
You do investment advising? Right, so I want to come back to this notion of delay, but let's hold on to this notion of delay. So could you help me? Would it be cruel to put Willie in the chair the second time?
Yes.
So I'm going to come back to you. So if they put him in the chair the second time the next day, would it not be cruel?
Well, they haven't proven that this method is going to be effective in killing him quickly without suffering. So
well,
I
now
would say it would still be cruel.
Good. So give me a conceptual definition of cruelty. Give me a definition of cruelty. Come on, welcome back to college.
Causing undue harm or physical pain, physical emotional pain.
Extended.
Extended. And is it the amount of the pain that you care about? Or is it the undueness of the pain that you care about? Because according to the state of Louisiana, the pain is completely due to Willie, right? Because Willie murdered someone. But I'll be back. So you said it would be cruel to put him in the chair?
Correct.
Why?
Well, I think it's been answered, but the psychological trauma is not what
Good.
was meant.
Good. So suppose Willie was anesthetized sedated right after the first electrocution and kept in sedation until the second electrocution. Would it be cruel to put him in?
No.
God, I love college. I mean, I do. I love college.
Sedated before the first one?
No. As soon as the first one failed, they gave him a sedative.
No, it doesn't matter.
So
if
then
they
it's
would
not.
have sedated him before the first one,
Good.
that's fine.
Good.
But the subsequent sedation is no.
But assume there's no psychological suffering. Is it cruel?
Yes.
So why is it cruel?
I don't believe in the death penalty.
Oh,
He said
that's
I'm a
so.
criminal defense attorney. It's not fair.
You're not playing fair. So let me ask Fatula. Fatula, would it be cruel to put him in the chair the second time?
Yes,
Why?
because I think if something's cruel, it's with an intended or unintended consequence.
Good.
Is more than just the act. I mean, they were trying to kill him.
Good.
Once you start doing it multiple times,
Yes.
then something else starts happening. I mean, the act of doing it, the process
Good.
of it,
Good.
becomes more about just the death, and
Good.
that is
Good. So
Does
let's
it
whoa.
Whoa.
No. I got the PhD.
How do you know I didn't?
I assume you do. You're at Amherst. So let me, before you interrupt, let me ask Fatula Vaughn a question. Make the best argument that it's not cruel. Welcome back to college, right? Because this is what we do at Amherst.
Are you gonna
We ask
push people?
students, again, I'm killing a dime for you, right? We ask students not just to think about what their opinions are, but to, if you will, think about the arguments on the other side, so as to strengthen their view. So what would be the best argument that it's not cruel?
I would argue that that the state in some sense is not responsible for the unintended consequence.
Yeah.
The state started with the purpose of executing him as a response to what he had done.
Good.
And that their role was to do that. And that, what if there had been sort of a freak snowstorm? What if there was something beyond their control, and that because they didn't intend it to be cruel, that their intention should still be honored.
Persuasive?
Whether they're required to carry out a sentence.
Required to carry the sentence. If the sentence, why I bracketed the question about the constitutionality of the death penalty, if the sentence is constitutional, the sentence is legal, then the state has an interest, and the people of the state have an interest in carrying out the sentence. But I held you up, so yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering about the sentence is to end his life.
Yeah.
And I assume it was to end his life in the electric chair. Probably,
Correct.
I'm just guessing it was specific that way.
Yeah.
But the intent there is really not to torture him or make him suffer.
Good, right.
And the belief was that the electric chair is actually a humane way of doing it.
Correct.
So I guess what I'm wondering then is what they have demonstrated with their fecklessness with this electric chair has actually taken it out of that realm.
Good.
And therefore they've crossed a line where they're starting to torture him, which is not what the sentence said to do.
Good.
I was
So I
just
just
going to actually add this to the defense in this case, or made the same argument you're making, in that they pointed directly to the law. Where was this case?
Say again?
Where? Louisiana. The law in Louisiana, the statute that said that it has to be a single constant electric current. And the defense quoted that statute directly and saying that it was unconstitutional from the very moment that it wasn't a single electric shock, that it was multiple occurrences. So they were that specific in the statute. But again, that was
The dissent.
thank you.
Right, and in fact, the majority in the case, this is a case called Francis versus Rees-Weber. I do recommend it to you for reading. It's actually quite an interesting case. Decided that it would not be cruel to put him back in the chair the second time on the grounds that Fatula identified. That an accident cannot produce cruelty. That for something to be cruel in the constitutional sense, it had to be an intentional act. Now, I want you to think about what cruelty is. So we could think about cruelty in a variety of ways. We could think about cruelty in terms of the intention of the inflictor. We could think about cruelty in terms of the experience of the person on whom the punishment is inflicted. We could think about cruelty in terms of severity of pain, so that something can't be cruel, right, unless it is very severe. As you were saying, whatever those other things are, they're not death. Or, here's a fourth possibility, we could think about cruelty as the excessive infliction of pain. So something is cruel if it imposes more pain than is necessary for a legitimate purpose, no matter how de minimis, I'm showing off my junior high school, de minimis the infliction of the pain is. Those are all very different conceptions of cruelty. So if cruelty is merely imposing excess more than is necessary, then we don't need a standard of severity. And if cruelty is about the intention or lack thereof of the inflictor, then we're not focusing on the experience of the Willie Francis, we're focusing on the mindset, if you will, of the execution. Now, why do I start with the Francis case? I start with the Francis case for a couple of reasons. One is I think it is probably the most celebrated botched. By the way, would you all agree that this is a botched execution?
Yeah.
You're nodding. Why would you call it a botched execution? I'm sorry, I can't read your name tag.
By definition, it didn't happen.
By definition, it didn't happen.
He was supposed to be executed and he wasn't.
Uh-huh. So it's botched in the sense of the state's sentence wasn't carried out. Would you say it was botched in what I'm going to call a technological sense? God bless.
Certainly.
Yeah, would you all agree with that? It's botched in a technological sense? So an execution is botched if there is a protocol which says, as Heather said, the state of Louisiana statute required that electrocution be by a single and continuous application of electricity sufficient to cause death. Generally, when people do research on botched executions, they're interested in what I'm going to call the normative question of cruelty. Are they cruel or are they not cruel? And the project that we've done together on the history of botched executions in the 20th century took a slightly different tack, at least at the beginning. What we were interested in is first and foremost merely documenting the number, the incidence of botched executions in the United States over the course of 100 years. And I think it is fair to say that no such archive or database existed. The Death Penalty Information Center has an archive of all botched executions since 1972. 1972 being the year when the United States Supreme Court struck down, at least temporarily, the death penalty in Furman versus Georgia. So the first work of the project was to create an archive that did not anywhere exist. I get goosebumps even saying that, because it now exists at Amherst College. So when you think about your college, some people call Amherst the singing college. I want you now to think about it as the botched executions college. And thanks to the great work of our public affairs people, if you go on the website today, the homepage of your college, there is at the top a photo of Biddy Martin giving her commencement address, and then a little thing about an article about botched executions at Amherst College. So we have this archive that the students created. And in and of itself, if we did nothing else, that archive is a substantial scholarly achievement. Our project was interested in the first instance in documenting the number of botched executions, and second of all, and more importantly, describing what we call their cultural reception. Botched executions as cultural events. We were interested in how it is that newspapers would treat and cover these botched executions, because we thought that the public perception of the legitimacy of the death penalty depends in part on whether or not the death penalty can be carried out in a way which is as nearly as possible flawless, if you allow me to say it, in its execution. Now, Henry, it will tell us, how many botched executions do we have in our database?
About 270.
About 270, more or less. And how many executions roughly between 1900 and 2011?
Yeah.
8,800.
8,800. So those of you that majored in math, 270 out of 8,800, what percentage?
3%.
Any dissenting views on that? So roughly 3% of the executions that we think have happened in the United States over about a 100-year period had a failure in the protocol. By botched executions, we are not talking about the execution of the innocent. That would be a botched execution in a different sense. We're talking about, near as we can tell, what is the protocol for a hanging? Did that happen? What is the protocol for electrocution? Did that happen? What is the protocol for a lethal injection? Did that happen? Yeah.
But most of those were probably a lot earlier.
We're going to ask Henry in 1 sec. But wait a minute, I got a question in the back of the room.
I was just going to ask you if the project has related the incidence or percentage of botched executions by method of execution.
Good. Henry.
Right. Well, the way our numbers say that lethal injection is actually the most dangerous method of execution.
Most likely to be botched.
Most likely to be botched. Now, there are some problems because hanging is, I mean, the vast majority of the cases are from like 1900 to 1920, 1930. And we had a lot of trouble getting newspaper coverage on every one of those executions.
And then also you have newspapers didn't necessarily recognize things that we would constitute as a botched execution as botched. So if in the newspaper it said that his neck wasn't broken, we would consider that a botched execution, whereas some newspaper reporters wouldn't consider that a botched execution.
Did they all die?
Eventually, yes, but...
So in the context of a hanging, a botched execution would be a strangulation rather than a breaking of the neck. In the context of an electrocution, a botched execution might be, are any of you from Florida? Been to Florida, know where Florida is? You know where Florida is. What's the capital of Florida?
Capital of Florida, I think it's Tallahassee.
Good, way to go. Totally good. Florida kind of notoriously had a bad time with the electric chair. People were burned. They would catch fire. That's a botched execution in our context. In lethal injection could be botched in a variety of ways. Namely, they can't find a vein, or it takes a very, very long time to find a vein, and they're repeatedly trying to insert the... So
we've had bathroom break cases.
Bathroom what?
There were a few cases where the condemned had to be given a bathroom break because it was taking so long to find a vein.
So what our definition of a botched execution is anything that departs from the protocol having to do with the way in which the method is supposed to work. But let me just step back from botched executions for 1 sec. We'll come back to them in 1 minute and tell you about this Mellon project. So, how many of you majored in the sciences here? Physical or natural sciences? Fabulous. And did you have the opportunity to work in someone's lab when you were here? What was your major in the back?
Geology.
Oh, geology.
Dr. Foos was not like that.
I know, I didn't mean geology, I meant geology. All right. Physics, chemistry, biology, anybody here? Biology, physics, chemistry? What was your major?
Biochemistry.
Biochemistry. Did you have an opportunity to work in someone's lab?
Yep.
Who was it?
Dr. Kidder.
Fabulous, completely fabulous. So, for a long time, Amherst College has been a leader in offering students the experience of having real hands-on research experience in the sciences. So one of the reasons that we might say to students who are interested in the sciences to come here was that you could have the opportunity of collaborating with a faculty member, not simply being a kind of factotum, but being a collaborator with a faculty member in the physical and natural sciences, maybe geology.
We went out in the field too.
Okay. But that experience of collaboration was largely not replicated in the humanities and social sciences. And where it happened on a quite accidental basis. Over the course of my teaching at Amherst, which is coming up to about 40 years, I just took my breath away. I've written, prior to my work with Henry and Heather and our collaborators, I've written, I would say, 7 published articles with Amherst undergraduates. But it was quite accidental. I was interested in something, and the undergraduate was doing a thesis, and I said, why don't we work together? So a few years ago, I worked in the dean of the faculty's office as a so-called senior advisor to the dean, which meant I had no responsibility except to think up new ideas. And I said to the dean, Greg Cole, we ought to try to provide an experience for students in the humanities and social sciences which is like the experiences that students can have in the sciences, namely an experience of collaborating, not working for but working with. So again, it's quite regular all the time that I have students as, I should have told you, by the way, to shut off your cell phone. I forgot to do that. When my son was bar mitzvahed, the rabbi started the service by saying, everybody shut off their cell phone, in a very portentous way. And about a minute and a half in, his cell phone rang. You know there's a God, right? Which was fabulous. So we thought that, in fact, what students in the social sciences and humanities could benefit from is a collaborative experience. For years, I've hired students as research assistants, go to the library, find things, bring them back. So we proposed to the Mellon Foundation that the college develop what we call research tutorials for sophomores and juniors. These are not departmental courses. They're not research seminars in the departments. They're efforts to introduce students to what I call a research disposition. What does it mean to think like a researcher? And many of you who do research might agree or disagree with this, but I think the research disposition is to think about everything in terms of what opportunities for research it affords. So when I read an article, I'm thinking, what opportunities of research are here? When I read a court case, what opportunities are for research are here? When I have a conversation with my wife, Stephanie, I think, why am I not reading an article or reading a court case? And that research disposition, that disposition to think about research opportunities is what we've tried to encourage in the social sciences and humanities. And I've been offering, just finished the 2nd year of a research tutorial for 2nd semester sophomores, limited to 2nd semester sophomores, an enrollment limit of 6, no more than 6 students, a research tutorial called America's Death Penalty. The purpose of the research tutorial is not to introduce students to America's death penalty so that they can work with me, but introduce them into what does it mean to do research in the social sciences and humanities. But in the course of the research tutorial that Henry and Heather did with me on America's death penalty, I decided I wanted to do a project on botched executions. And I invited the 6 students to collaborate with me, to spend the summer collaborating with me on this project on botched executions. 5 of the 6 took up the opportunity to do so. And what I wanted to do is to just ask Heather and Henry to talk a little bit about their experience in this research tutorial and their experience in this collaborative enterprise. I should just tell you, we've published now 2 articles. One I hope you each have a copy of, and if you don't, I hope you'll take it before you leave. And we have made a presentation on a project at a professional meeting, at the professional meeting of the Association for the Study of Law, Culture, and Humanities at Fort Worth, Texas. This is a relatively young professional association, now about 15 years. The first time in the history of this young association that undergraduates made the presentation. They made the presentation at Law, Culture, and Humanities. And let me tell you something. It was the best. I mean, it truly was. I mean, literally, other than Ben's bar mitzvah, it was, which I'm obsessed. It was truly magnificent. But so, if Henry and Heather could say a few words about their experience in the America's Death Penalty course and their experience in collaborating on the botched execution project.
All right. The coursework was fundamentally different from anything else I've done at Amherst. First, we read less week to week because we would read 1 or 2 articles maybe or another source, and then we would critique it very closely. And instead of just asking what can I criticize about this argument, what do I like about this argument, we would think about the researchable questions that this piece opens. So what's left unfinished? or what would Foucault have to say about this? And then at the end, the large culminating project, in addition to kind of constant responses to what we were doing, instead of having this kind of, the standard thing, it would be like a 20-page, research paper where you synthesize a bunch of different sources and maybe you have a thesis. But we did something completely different. We all wrote research proposals. So we envisioned a project about some aspect of America's death penalty. And then we spent the bulk of the paper summarizing what had already been done in the field. And the idea was, what was the metaphor? A funnel. The funnel. This research proposal was supposed to narrow in on a question that we believed to be unanswered and that we intended to answer. And so this was an interesting exercise, unique in my time at Amherst. And it really shows how the course was much more focused on teaching us how to be researchers, how to be creators of knowledge, rather than simply absorbing. I mean, in other courses you don't just absorb, you also critique. But this is kind of a new level of putting yourself on the same level as your professor, really. It blurs the boundary between what is a student and what is a scholar.
Yeah, I agree with what Henry has to say, and I just want to add that there were 2 students who did their proposals alone, and then the rest of us, the 4 of us, split into 2 groups. So really from the very beginning, for most of the class, it was a collaborative project, and it was one of the first projects in which I had a research partner that I actually had a good time working with that person. I'm not generally a person who loves to work in groups, but this project was really very enjoyable. We all worked very well together, and writing this paper together and all the work that we've done was not difficult at all. And it was just a great experience to show me that collaborating, not only with professors, but with other students could be an enjoyable experience and really beneficial. For my research proposal for the class, I worked with Aubrey, who's also in the author list there. And we actually proposed something very similar to the paper that you're reading now. So we took a look at what research existed about media studies at the time, like media studies, like looking at newspapers generally, and then looking about research on death penalty execution methods. And we sort of worked down, and our question ended up being something about the cultural reception of botched executions, which we ended up developing into a project. So our proposal actually ended up becoming almost the paper that you have in front of you. So it was just extremely, like, it was an amazing experience, basically, to have a research proposal that you worked on for an entire semester become actually a published paper, and a paper that you got to work on with Professor Sarat and 4 other extremely intelligent students and willing to work hard.
So there's an effort, may I just say, I think that the Mellon Project is part of an effort to think a little bit differently about Amherst's curriculum or non-curriculum. What we basically have here is a kind of a pyramid curriculum, the typical way in which a curriculum is organized. And students take for Amherst, large introductory courses, sometimes offered in sections. As freshmen, as juniors, they declare the major as a sophomore. As juniors, sometimes in their departments, they'll do research seminars, and then they'll have a culminating research experience as a senior. And that's built on what I'm going to call an expertise or accumulation of knowledge model, so that the research experience comes at the end. It's sometimes called the capstone or the culminating experience, and it's a little bit like certifying someone. You've been here for 3 years, now you are capable of going out and, again, to use this metaphor, being a scholar and creating knowledge. The Mellon Project is designed to turn that a little bit on its head, to introduce students at a very early stage in their career to the possibility that they can think of themselves as capable of producing knowledge, of answering questions, if you will, for themselves, of reading and thinking about the material that they encounter in terms of what they themselves could do with it. These courses are different from traditional research seminars in which the research paper is an add-on to another course. So I'm teaching a course on X, and I make it a research seminar, and it's a course on X, and there's a research paper done at the end. These courses were about the research more than the subject. What mattered is not that they learned something about America's death penalty, but they learned to identify researchable questions. They learned to ask where these questions come from. They learned to think about the different ways in which you go about pursuing research, the different ways in which you go about gathering information, the different ways in which you go about analyzing. So the Mellon Foundation really has liked this project. We're very hopeful. We don't know yet that Mellon will refund this project so that we can keep going for another few years. There are two bad possibilities that come out of this project. One is that it doesn't work, and the other is that it does work. Because if it does work, the question will be how to integrate it into the Amherst curriculum. The other thing I wanted to say was to reinforce something that Henry and Heather both mentioned, but Heather in particular mentioned. Much of the experience of students here is the experience of isolation. This is your project, go do it. But most of the experience that we all have out in the world is an experience of collaboration, in which the work that we do isn't simply playing solo. And the college probably hasn't done, am I allowed to use that critical word? Okay, so the college has failed to develop, sorry about that. The college hasn't done as much as it could do in the social sciences and humanities to provide students an opportunity to learn to be good collaborators. They come out of high school learning to be good superstars, to shine in their own orbit. And one of the things that we believe that this Mellon project will do will give students an opportunity to develop their skills as in the intellectual domain, not just on the sports field or in the orchestra, in collaboration. So we hope that this Mellon project is an opening to a few new things, at least in the social sciences and humanities in our curriculum. Yes, sir.
Could you get some other comments on other similar projects that are underway?
I didn't hear the first part.
Examples of other examples in addition to this wonderful course that other people have done under the
Good. Yeah, totally fabulous. That's a great question. So we started out with the idea that there would be 4 of these, 2 sophomores and two juniors. A colleague in the classics department offered a sophomore tutorial. A colleague in political science, Javier Corrales, offered a junior tutorial on education reform. Colleague in black studies, Hillary Moss, offered a junior tutorial, which was a kind of, she's interested in education and racial segregation. This year, the word got out on the street. This is, who cares about this, but don't listen to this. This was the single best teaching experience, other than the class I taught with Fatula, that I ever had at Amherst. I mean, it just is transformative. And I think the other faculty felt similarly, that it's just an unbelievable experience. They are my collaborators. Yes, there's certain things I know, but there's certain things that they know. This year we had 8 of them. We had someone that did, what was Anston's, Missy?
The King James Bible.
Did a research tutorial on the King James Bible. We had a woman in the religion department, a wonderful scholar named Maria Hine, do a research tutorial on the Silk Road. So there have been a range. We had Chris Dole in the sociology department doing one on catastrophe. I used to sit next to Chris in the meetings. The death penalty and catastrophe seem to go well together. So there are a range of them in the social sciences and the humanities, sophomores and juniors. Yeah.
Small follow-up. How are you going to present this to Mellon for the assessment?
Good. Well, we're evaluating the courses. We asked a distinctive set of evaluative questions, one of which Henry spoke to, like, did this course teach you to read in ways it didn't otherwise read? So we're going to have these measures, but it's subjective. And as we say in the deliverable business, we're going to show them some deliverables, which is why I hope you'll take an article out of that box and read it. it's an experiment. So this summer, I've got another group of students. We're doing a project called Scenes of Execution, in which we're going to do a project looking at the way in which the scene of execution is portrayed in contemporary American film from 1950 to the end of the century. It might or might not work, but we hope that the evaluations from the particular courses and the, quote, deliverables, here they went to a professional meeting, they wrote an article, will be enough to persuade Mellon of the virtue of this activity. Yeah.
Is this a scalable model? I mean, you have 6 students at a time.
There you go.
Working on the project. And it's an education philosophy that you're seeing more of in some places, and in high schools and such, getting collaboration and project-based, experiential, and it seems like it makes sense.
Well, I said there are 2 bad results. One is that it fails, and the other that it succeeds. And the that it succeeds is exactly what you said. When we went to the Committee on Educational Policy and we said, course limit of 6, there was mild skepticism as to whether or not those of us that were teaching the 6 would be carrying our loads. By the way, I should tell you that many of the people doing these seminars are doing them as overloads. So as you know, the course load at Amherst is 2 and 2. This is my 3rd course, so people are doing it as an overload. Is it scalable? Well, the answer is yes and no. When people do an honors thesis here, it's a one-on-one experience. So it's 1 and 6. It's scalable. But, and again, this is part of the problem. It's not clear that this experience, that every student would benefit from this experience as a second semester sophomore. It's not clear that every student as a second semester sophomore would get as much out of it as these particular students, I believe, got out of it. So there are lots of questions about implementation, how it will be implemented, and how much of it that we can do. But again, this is your college. The motto of Amherst is each, not everybody. We don't think that the same thing is right for everybody. We try to find ways to connect with the needs and strengths and dispositions of each student. So whether we can do it over the long term, I don't know, we'll see. And I'm not going to retire for another 20 years, so I'm going to keep doing it for another 20 years.
Is it the intent, or maybe it's directed at the students, the notion that this is something that they would take if they like the subject enough and cause it to become the subject of a thesis, perhaps?
Not necessarily, but that door's not necessarily closed either. I'm sure if we wanted to continue researching botched executions in the context of a thesis, we probably could. But we've already written a great deal on the subject already, and we're still working on projects.
But it sounds like he's taking up another section, which is the scenes of botched. So I'm just wondering, as to your question of timing, is it right for every second semester sophomore versus juniors? And I would think the closer you get to your senior year, the greater the likelihood that interest can be focused enough. You say, I want to take this to the next level.
Yeah, so may I just tell you, that's built into the Mellon model. It is. So there's a sophomore tutorial and a junior tutorial.
Okay.
The junior tutorial, see, one of the experiences, if you're in the social sciences and humanities, if you're in the sciences and you have a lab, you can say to your students, if you want to do an honors thesis with me, you have to kill rats, right? Or you have to find rocks. You have to do what I'm doing. But in the social sciences and humanities, that's not typically the way it's been. So in political science, every year we sit around and there's always, I hope none of you proposed this one, by the way, there's always somebody who proposed to do a thesis on the electoral college. Well, there's nobody in the political science department that does work on the electoral college. So we sit around and we say, who's going to advise the electoral college? And what we're trying to do through this, you see, is to alter a little bit. So the junior tutorials are really designed to introduce students to an area of work in which the faculty member is working so that they can design an honors thesis. I wanted to say one other thing, by the way, about what's innovative about this, and that's been the role of the library. So this project has benefited enormously from real collaboration with the library. Librarians have participated in these courses not as kind of technical assistants. Here's where you go to find the sources. But we're trying to build a model, shall I use the word again, of collaboration between the faculty and the library, and the faculty and academic technology, which brings librarians into our classrooms as co-participants in a pedagogical enterprise. Missy Ross is sitting right behind you. Missy is sometimes we call her an embedded librarian, and sometimes we say she's the one that did all the work in the course. So this is yet another place where this project is opening up possibilities for kinds of collaborations which in the past haven't much occurred. Yeah, I just want to make sure that someone else gets in.
What impact is this kind of work going to have legislatively? Are there new methods of execution, like whatever happened in the firing squad? Are there new methods that might be switched to if your botching shows up obviously enough to the general public?
Good. So that's a great question. Our work has not been driven by a set of normative arguments. Our work was first descriptive and then analytic. We wanted to just know how much of this was out there, botched executions, and we wanted to see the way in which newspapers covered it. We had a question, which is, does the coverage of botched executions tend to mount a criticism of capital punishment? But our work was not driven by a set of normative or policy arguments. Henry says approximately 3% of executions in the United States are botched. So let's be a legislature. Is that too much or too little? Or just right? Right, that's a real question. I mean, you could say death is different, and if we're going to execute people, there may be no tolerance for error. That's one normative position. But another normative position is 3 out of 100, that's not so bad in terms of, let's call it a rate of technological failure. But our work, I don't think is going to contribute to finding a better, finding a better method of execution or arguments of that kind. Yeah.
How do you know? He referred to reading articles. I've never seen an article that I can recall that said that an execution was botched. Do they have reporters watching it?
Almost our entire project basically comes from newspaper coverage. Our definition of cultural reception, or our source, if you will, of cultural reception, is newspaper coverage. So yes, we've got lots of newspaper articles that, if not explicitly using the word botch, they certainly describe an execution that was botched. We brought a few quotes.
I think there's not the time, but if you're interested, pick up a copy of the article. We describe some of the newspaper coverage. The newspaper coverage, especially at the beginning of the century, was incredibly detailed about what happened at the execution. So newspapers, and it would make sense, especially the early part of the century where the newspapers were very sensational, that a botched execution is a newsworthy thing. And I think it's still the case in the United States that botched executions tend to be newsworthy things.
Especially because the public doesn't have access to these executions. In fact, now the newspapers, more than when hangings were public events, are more important because it's the only way that we can hear about these executions. Otherwise, it's just completely behind prison walls.
I have a quick question.
It's a quick question. So, did they get him the second time?
You know, this is really terrible. I mean, you want the end of the story? Alas, Willie Francis was electrocuted to death the second time. And if you're if you're interested in the Francis execution, and it's a compelling story. There's an edited collection called Death Penalty Stories, which contains chapters about various death penalty cases, and there is a brilliant chapter on the execution of Willie Francis. Yes, he was put to death in the electrocution.
At least the young man in the middle.
Why would people want to hear about executions? Like, why would you want to learn about it?
That is my whole life. So I'll give you an. That's a compelling and great question. My relatives asked me this same question, which is, why is it that you want to study this? So this is
not why you would want to study it, but why would the general public find it interesting and newspapers?
There are kind of two different answers that I would give you. One is that the botched execution is to the execution what an automobile accident is to driving on the highway. So if you've been on a highway and there's an accident on the side of the road, traffic all slows, people are drawn to these unusual events. The second answer is really not exactly an answer to the question, which is a great question, and that is that If the United States is going to retain capital punishment, when any state in the United States executes, it executes in all of our names. It executes in the names of the citizens. We live in a constitutional democracy. And if the United States is going to have a death penalty, then it is the responsibility of the citizens of the United States to understand what it is that the state does in our name, and the state exercises the ultimate power of sovereignty, which is the power to take life. So that's an argument about why people are interested, and an argument about why people should be interested. And I have to tell you, I do a lot of death penalty talks, and that's the single best question I think I've ever heard in a death penalty talk. So, could we sign you up to come to Amherst?